this is Larry Hatch again, and this is our fourth episode of Goodsvesting. A lot of you have asked me for some very specific examples of the categories of investing and how to do those. We're going to go over about 10 different categories in detail, maybe an episode each, but I want to do in the next couple episodes just an overview of the categories to give you a feel for it. I'm still developing some of these ideas, and I don't do all of them myself. I've learned a lot of these from others. Some of them I've done for quite a few years, 20 years. So my experience level and yours probably is going to vary a little bit. Our first category is vehicles, and I want to start with vehicles because they are subject to a great deal of inflation. You know, that Honda Accord used to be $10,000. Now it's $30,000. It's gonna someday be $100,000, which is what you can get a used Ferrari for today. So, again, we're looking towards future inflation. Now, the first thing somebody's going to say is cars are depreciating asset. Depreciating asset. That is true. If they're driven, if they have mileage on them, if they're worn, especially if they're not taken care of. But if you put aside a vehicle for various reasons, and we'll discuss those, that vehicle can increase in value. You put aside a vehicle, even a common vehicle, with 100 miles on it, drive it a little bit a year, maybe once a month around the block or around the neighborhood or the city, that vehicle is going to hold its value. And I was a guy who used to buy used cars that little old ladies drove like once on Sunday. And those cars were expensive. They were old, but they were expensive and very, very low mileage. So a car will hold a lot of its value, not as much as a new one, if there's low mileage on it and it's kept up, stored correctly. I want to emphasize that the value of a stored vehicle, if it's a daily driver, is mainly in what it would cost you to get another one comparable or a new one. So if you buy a car today for $20,000 and that model goes up to $30,000, you've saved $10,000 in theory. Maybe not with the latest technology, but that can be overcome. By the way, people tell me you can upgrade cars pretty easily. You can put a GPS in a Model T if you want. You know, you can do a lot of stuff making an older car closer to a new car. And there's shops and parts catalogs that'll let you put all this new technology on an older car. Just want to get that out of the way. The main thing about investing in cars is people think of future classics. You know, right now people are putting away Hellcats and Mustang GT, this or that, 500s, 250s as future classics. The investment car business, that's a whole different thing. We're not really going to get into that because I think a lot of you guys are not really in that bracket. I'm looking more towards the practical thing, what we would call a retirement truck. I had a friend who's about to retire. He and his wife took cash. As Dave Ramsey would say, car loan is stupid. Well, a lot of us have to have car loans. But my friend had enough money. He took $60,000 cash and bought I think it was a Ford F-250 truck, loaded. He and his wife plan to drive the daylights out of that thing for 20 or 25 years. So even though he took $60,000 in cash out of his savings, over a period of 20 or 25 years, that's still a pretty darn good investment. Plus he's going to use it for a part-time business. He got some write-offs on that. Again, the retirement truck, interesting idea. Another concept is replacing your daily driver, assuming it's not a truck. You know, I know a couple that have had Honda Accords for like ages, and they bought a new Honda Accord last year, and they're putting it away in their garage. They're maintaining it and, you know, keeping all of it running and fluids and good stuff. And they expect that they'll need that in 5 to 7 years, I think it is, they said. when their current vehicle goes bad. Again, sometimes you don't know when your vehicle is going to go bad. You say, hey, I'll keep this vehicle 7 to 10 years. Hey, you might keep it 15. So if you've got a backup daily driver, that's an interesting thing. If your main car breaks, you got a backup. You can loan it to your family and friends or anybody who's in need of it. Again, keep the car in stored, low mileage, and that'll keep its value, future value up for you. Other people look at it another way. They want to keep the one car they have that they like running forever. So you can stockpile parts of a car. We all know what's going to go wrong with a car eventually. You know, alternator, um, oil pump, fuel pump, stuff like that. And you probably don't want to stockpile a transmission. But we all know the stuff that wears out on a car eventually, fan belts, that kind of thing. We can stockpile those things, and you can get your machine 200, 400,000 miles on a very well maintained vehicle. It's not that uncommon. Again, some people would rather invest in the one car with parts and not so much in a backup car and storage. Sometimes you can do both. Hey, there's different combinations of these things, and we'll talk about those later. Another thing that people do, even middle class people, is the bus or RV as a house replacement. So basically, you have a house. You don't have any kids anymore. You don't need the huge house. Even the small house you might not need. You don't want a condo. You want to hit the road, do your bucket list. So you invest in a substantial RV or small bus as the replacement of your house, and that is where you live. Obviously, you can camp out with friends and relatives. They have the more conveniences of a home part of the year. You know, I know some people they'll spend like a couple of months with each kid, and then the rest of the time they're on the road. That's probably not for elderly people, but hey, you know, from 55 or 60 to whenever, hey, that's a great idea. I knew a dentist when I was growing up. He and his wife had a very expensive house, which at the time was $300,000. It's probably $1 million house today. They sold the thing lock, stock, and barrel to one of their kids, and the kids sort of divided up the money. Anyway, that's complicated. And they bought a very nice RV, kind of bus size, and they just took it around and went from place to place, and child and grandchild to grandchild, and that was their way of doing it. For $300,000 in the day, you could get quite a nice machine, and they did. It's probably about $700,000 worth today, but that's one thing you can do. Our next category is food and beverage. Now, as we know, most foods and beverages and things are perishable. So stockpiling foods and beverages can be a tough thing. The obviously good one is alcohol. That's lasted people for years. And again, the principle used to be grains are perishable. You lose them over the winter. So people would turn grains and grapes into beverages so they could be preserved and their value could increase. That's what founder of our country did, George Washington. He asked his Scottish farmer. He said, "We're losing a lot of winter wheat. We're the rats are getting it, the mold is getting it, the heat is getting it. What do we do?" Well, his farm manager was from Scotland. He knew exactly what to do, and that's how George Washington, for a couple of years, became the largest producer of whiskey in the United States at Mount Vernon, and they make it there again today. If you want the values of our founding fathers, well, be a whiskey maker and drinker. How's that, folks? Anyway, having a wine cellar or a climate-controlled storage area will let you store wine, whiskey, and ageable beer. The first two are obvious, but ageable beer is a new thing to a lot of people. I once bought a 7-year-old beer, and it was probably the best beer I'd ever had. Most of them are dark beers. They're mostly bottle conditioned, meaning they have extra yeast and sugar put in them so that they will age and mature. That sugar in the bottle and that extra yeast in the bottle will continue to make good things happen in the bottle. Now, sometimes aging a beer is limited to a couple of years, but I've had beers that were up to 7 years old and they were amazing. If you buy them aged, look out. $20, $30 a bottle, equivalent to some wines. So ageable beer is going to be a new thing. Uncut cheese wheels is an investment. And I gotta say, uncut. Once you cut a cheese wheel, it's probably got a lifespan in the refrigerator or freezer of 2 weeks to at most a couple months. Dry, harder cheeses will last longer. But if you take a cheese wheel, buy a cheese wheel in wax, leave it in a suitable environment, and don't touch it for a long period of time, it will have value. I did some research here. Let me pull this out. A top grade Parmigiano Reggiano from Italy will generally run you $600 to $1,300 a cheese wheel, or about $15 to $30 a pound. That kind of varies. Because it's a very hard aged cheese, once you cut it, you can store it in a little bit and give it away. But again, $600 to $1,300 for a wheel of cheese, that is an investment. A good grade of cheddar, domestic American cheddar, will be $30 to $100 for a good sized wheel. You can buy smaller cheese wheels. Of course, you can get something in wax for $10. I've had good luck keeping certain cheeses for a long time. And if you go to a cheese shop, you'll see the most expensive cheeses of the hard type are usually the older ones. A 3-year-old cheddar costs more than a 2-year-old cheddar, which costs more than a 1-year-old cheddar, which costs more than a 90-day cheddar. So hey, you age that cheddar, you'll have the best mac and cheese and casserole and pizza you've ever had. Again, they got to be uncut cheese wheels to make them highly durable, and they will last for years. Unfortunately, there's a big no. Lobster, fish, and oysters do not freeze very well. Obviously, they don't keep very well. A friend of mine says, well, I have live lobsters. Well, yeah, okay. If you have a lobster tank, go for it. But unfortunately, expensive seafood generally does not keep terribly long. You can invest in a smoker and smoke fish. That's another thing. But generally, seafood, unfortunately, even though it has very high value, can't be preserved. Too much profit. Rare and costly spices is the next point, and I think it's a really good one. Some spices are very expensive. If you go to a spice only store, they have them these days, or online. These things are quite expensive. Some are very perishable, like saffron and whatnot, but you can stockpile very good quality spices. Again, they pretty much have to be vacuum packed in a dark jar, free from humidity and oxygen, heat, cold, all that good stuff. But again, I've bought some spices for a couple of dollars that now are $10, $12 a bottle. Again, if you like something, you're going to use it. That's a good investment. Our last category, real quickly, is plants and trees. And that's one we're going to be getting a lot into, because not only are plants and trees something that grows, it's literally a growing investment. It's sustainable and obviously ecological if done correctly. I'm assuming you're not going to put a million herbicides and pesticides on this stuff. I left out this point, and I should not have. A well-done landscape with premium, high-quality maintained trees and shrubs can add 5, 10, occasionally 15% to the value of a property. Just think if you live in a nice house and you have a landscape that's just lights knock out, colorful trees, seasonal trees, beautiful weeping conifers, whatever. That house is gonna pop on your neighborhood and sell. Um, that's why sometimes realtors put money into landscaping before they do anything else in a house. A lot of times people have great taste in houses, but bad taste in landscaping, or they hire a lousy landscaper. Invest in your landscape. Hey, it's going to pay off. A private forest is something interesting. If you have extra land, why let it sit there in weeds? Plant a forest. Within 25 to 50 years, again, this is for the future, sometimes 20 years, you can get that forest privately harvested. People will come in and do all the work for you, and you can do some good stuff. You may even get a tax deduction. A lot of areas, and the federal government has in the past paid people to develop land for ecological forestry purposes. I don't want to get into that because those laws change. Walnut trees is a big thing. People invest in walnut trees on their property. They might have a couple extra acres, plant some walnut trees. Not only do you get walnuts that you can use and sell, but those trees are growing. And walnut wood is extremely expensive and valuable. Again, you don't have to do the work. You can ask somebody to come in, harvest those trees, and if they're trustworthy, they'll give you a good price on that. Orchards are amazing. When I say an orchard, I don't just mean apple trees, peaches, pears, all that stuff. I mean, you throw in some blueberries, some blackberries, some raspberries. So not only trees, but cane fruits too. You'll have an endless supply of fruit for your table. We know produce is expensive. You can give away a lot. You might even want to sell a little bit. Hey, maybe your grandkids want to have a little fruit stand. Hey, there's an orchard with cane fruits also. A wonderful thing if you have some land to do that. Grow your next landscape. Let's say you're planning on buying a house or expanding your house, or just renovating your landscape. Some people say, "Hey, I know this landscape is lousy. We want to renovate it within a couple of years." So what you do is you buy some seedlings, you buy some rooted cuttings, you buy some grafts of good trees, probably clonal trees unless you're into native trees. Put them in containers, keep them watered. Whenever you're ready to plant them, they will have grown. So that little rooted cutting you buy for 79 cents will turn into a $20, $30, $40 tree. Hey, not bad. Grow your own landscape. You're literally growing money as the plants grow. I know a guy who did this. His family was building a house for one of their kids. He grew the plants out for that landscape for 3 years, and they saved thousands of dollars by growing their own trees. Again, you got to think ahead. You can sell plants, extra plants for profit, especially if it's rare plants. Hey, you can put them on eBay or somewhere. Just go on eBay, look at rare plants. My God, people are getting hundreds of dollars for some of these things. So anyway, give it a shot. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Again, I value your comments. Some of you have emailed me. Really appreciate that. But if you can share your comments publicly, even better. Thanks.